Hello and welcome to another video on the early modern period. In this video we are going to focus on what was the impact of local government on public health between 1500 and 1750. There is a previous video to this which looks at the gin craze and national government. It's worth a watch if you haven't watched it already. Before we kick off then, it's good to just remind ourselves of the key people in local government and national government. So we've got the King and Queen at the very top, which make up our national government alongside the Privy Council. In 1500 to 1649, they have the power to veto laws, which means cancel laws or choose laws, and can make decisions without Parliament. This all changes as a result of the Civil War. And from 1660 onwards, you had to consult Parliament on laws and running the state, so the monarch has less power. There is still the Parliament made up of the House of Lords and the House of Commons. The local government consists of a mayor who is in charge of the town, the alderman who is an early version of a town councillor, the town council who are a group of people elected to run the local government, and finally the town corporation who are a group of people elected to run the town or an organisation. So it's good just to get our heads around who the national and local governments were in the early modern period. So in order to learn about local government responses, we're going to look at two case studies, one of York and one of London. So the case study of York is from 1500 to 1670, and at this time York was actually the third largest and wealthiest city after Norwich and London. The photograph on the left is actually of the Shambles. You might recognise this, and this didn't really change until the 1900s. The aldermen in York in the 1500s introduced new laws, and we're going to look at some of them now. So that's why York is such an important case study for looking at local government. Your task then for this video, which is compulsory if you're learning this for the first time or optional if you are revising this, and what you'll need to do then is you will need a double page, and across the top of your double page you will need the title, what was the impact of local government on public health, so across the top of a double page. And on your first page on the left hand side you need to pop into the middle of a spider diagram which will fill up the full page, York 1500 to 1670, laws introduced by the aldermen in York. Okay, as we work through this video then you're going to add some notes to that spider diagram. So your first few bits of information to add to your spider diagram on the left hand side of your double page is that pigs were kept in a sty and not allowed to wander around the streets. We know this is a change from the medieval period and obviously is a step in the right direction. Household waste could not be put out for scavengers until 7 p.m, so that's avoiding the hustle and bustle of York town when people are going to and coming from work. And if your cesspit overflowed, you could pay scavengers to clean it out. So it wasn't a case of it's overflowing, there's not really much I can do about it. There was a designated person to look after this. At this point then, pause the video and add these 3 points to your spider diagram. So the next few points for your spider diagram are all about waste and how York successfully, to some extent, managed the problem of waste. We know waste was a huge problem in the medieval period, and this continues in the early modern period and is exacerbated by the fact that urbanisation occurs, so more people move into towns such as York. So anyone in York who made a dunghill actually was fined, which is good. People were fined for throwing human waste in the street. People were not allowed to build privies or toilets over streams which ran through the city, which meant there was more clean water, but it did mean that the waste had to be put elsewhere. All households had to clean the street outside the property twice a week, and nobody could block the gutters running down York's main streets. So take a moment then to pause this video and to add these few points to your spider diagram. So to dig a little deeper into the successfulness of the laws passed by the aldermen in York from 1500 to 1670, I would like you to make a key next to your spider diagram, and you will need 2 colours of your choice, and in one colour you are going to highlight aspects that are ineffective from the laws that the Aldermen introduced, and in another colour, effective. The answers are on the next slide. Okay then, let's have a look at the answers. So I think the following things were quite effective. Pigs being kept in sties. If your cesspit overflowed, then you could pay a scavenger to clean it out. Anyone who made a dunghill in the yard was fined. People were fined for throwing human waste. All households had to clean the streets outside their property twice a week, and nobody could block the gutters running down York's main streets. I did kind of question mark a few of them. For example, all households had to clean the streets outside their property twice a week. Is twice a week enough? Should it be more? And people not allowed to build privies over the stream which ran through the city. This meant clean water, but where did they put their waste in that case? And, you know, is it enough that there is a law against blocking the main gutters of York streets, but not every street? I also queried the second bullet point about household waste could only be put out for scavengers until 7 p.m. What do people do with their waste during the day then? We know they're not very trustworthy of putting it in a responsible place. But then again, if they did make a dunghill, they would also be fined. So there are a couple reflections of mine. Obviously, you will have highlighted your own and added your own opinions. Okay, we're now going to move on to looking at London as a case study in order to understand local government responses. So on the right hand side of the double page that you set up previously, you need to pop the title London 1500 to 1750, and you'll need to write the 3 questions out and leave some space to answer them as we progress through this video. Okay, so you'll need to sort out the following statements to fit under the correct question that you have written down in your book. Okay, so they're not in the correct order. You will need to sort them out and put them under the correct question. So town corporations spent many years focusing on making towns more pleasant places to live. Councils also encouraged builders to make streets and squares of large terraced housing where wealthy people could live in London. There were then oil-burning street lamps, which first appeared in London in the 1680s, and by 1750 most towns in the country had the main street lighting. You might remember when we learned about the medieval period, there was a lot of talk of the streets being quite dark and drafty and there not being much light, so this is quite an improvement. People's health was not the main concern, and they really just wanted life to be a bit more pleasant. As you can see from the picture above, this is how the early modern period appeared, and this change of housing into brick and stone housing after the Great Fire of London wasn't necessarily to do with health, it was also to make London a more appealing place and to keep the wealthy happy. Finally then, sewage had not improved much since the 1660s, and stinking, overflowing cesspits was still a massive problem in London. Okay, so pause this video then and pop these 5 bullet points under the correct heading that you have written into your book. Okay, so some more local government responses for London. There was actually, as I said previously, there was a big contrast between areas that had been improved by local councils and poorer areas. In poorer areas, they tended to be unpaved, unlit, and water still came from public conduits or on water cellars or from carts. Many more streets were paved with stone and lines of posts marked footway for pedestrians. You might have remembered when we learnt about the living conditions that lots of children and people were actually run over by horse and cart because there was no kind of pedestrianisation of these towns. There was no footpaths, for example. There was a reservoir built by Hugh Middleton in 1609, and this reservoir supplied lots of clean water to London. By 1750, several water companies in London and other towns piped water into homes of those that could afford it, and they had to pay annually for this. Finally, unfortunately, there is no connection between dirt and disease, and we don't get this connection until the late industrial period. Okay, take a moment then to pause this video and to write these 5 facts under the correct heading on the double page that you set up earlier in this video. Okay then, finally, you now need to highlight the changes made to London and decide if they were ineffective or effective, just as you did previously. So you can use the same key and the same colours. Remember, they could again be a little bit of both, and the answers are on the next slide. Okay, so this is how mine looks. The town corporations spending time focusing on making towns more pleasant places to live is quite positive. Councils encouraging builders to make streets and squares of large terrace houses is quite good. Maybe less so if only wealthy people can afford to live there. Oil burning street lamps is a step in the right direction. Many more streets being paved and pedestrianised, then that is definitely a step in the right direction. Reservoir being built and water companies helping to supply towns with piped water is quite positive. Obviously, it's not great that they have to pay for it annually, and it won't have been available to the poor. Some definite negatives then. People's health was not the main concern, they just wanted London to be a bit more pleasant. Sewage didn't improve. There was also, as I said, a big contrast between improved areas and poorer areas, and again, no connection had been made between dirt and disease. So pause this video and just have a little look and see if you colour-coded your answers correctly. Okay, I hope these two case studies of London and York have helped you to understand what the impact of local government on public health was between 1500 and 1750. Well done on completing your task, and thank you for watching.